This recording is protected by copyright. No part may be reproduced without the prior permission of the University of South Australia.
Okay, so welcome to week 2 of systems analysis. Hope you've survived the first week and your first tutorial for those of you that have had a tutorial this week. I've just had noticed that someone's posted a message on the course notice board and sent me a couple of emails in relation to not being able to find the online chapters. Has anyone had any problem finding the online chapters? Has anyone tried? Who's tried to find the online chapters? They are there? You found them? Okay, so I just want to quickly refresh and show you, in the weeks in which we have online chapters as pre-reading, which today was reading online chapter A as the pre-reading for today's lecture. If you click the essay link to online chapters, you can see here it says book resources, online chapters. Select book online chapters, and then you can just download the zip file. Okay, and that has all the online chapters there for you. For some reason, this monitor's display is not that good. I'll just switch role to student. I also just want to make it a habit of showing you for the given week what I've put up on the course website. So the reminder for this week is to make sure that you have completed the orientation quiz. For those of you that haven't, please watch the welcome video, go to the orientation quiz and complete the activities that I've got you to do during the orientation, or within the orientation tab rather. It just gives you a good grounding for the course, where things are at, how the course is going to run, etc., etc. So this week we're looking at the role of the systems analyst, which is online chapter A, which hopefully some of you or the majority of you have read before coming to class, in addition to printing and or reading the lecture slides which are here. So we'll be looking at the analyst as a business problem solver. We're looking at different types of systems that actually solve problems and what those systems are. What skills are required as a systems analyst, because there are quite a number of skills that a systems analyst does need to have, and a number of careers that some of you may choose to embark on as potential systems analysts in your choice of employment. Again, just a reminder, the tutorial is based on the previous week's lecture. So this week's tutorial is based on the introduction to the course. I didn't cover Chapter 1 last week. Chapter 1 is basically a snapshot of the textbook, and it basically gives you an overview and a rundown of what systems analysis is about, as well as systems design. So it's pretty much an overview chapter to give you a prelude to what we're covering in this course, as well as systems design course, which Wolfgang will take next study period. So I wanted you to read that chapter just to help your understanding and pre-preparation to get into the course, into what the material is going to be. You probably won't understand a lot of it, but I think it's just a good teaser to show you what's in store and what we're going to be doing in the up and coming weeks. You'll also need that to do this week's tutorial activities, as well as watch the video on the course website. As I mentioned, I've got the summary for week 2. So each week, in addition to the lecture material, I'll also have a summary to give you an indication of what we're covering each week. So the learning objectives and what I expect you to have, I guess, understood by the end of a given week. I think it's really good for you to be practicing and even looking at that document and perhaps ticking off again what you think you're familiar with, what perhaps you're not familiar with, so you can use it as a basis for revision and further consolidating any concepts that you're not sure of. In some weeks, I'll also have a revision activity. Again, as I mentioned in my tweet this morning, I think it's good to reinforce as much as possible. So the lectures will be there to introduce the material. You'll also have some videos to watch. The tutorials will be there to consolidate and practice based on the material that's been introduced in the lecture. The revision material is there to consolidate your concepts and just add further reinforcement to the learning that has been had for a particular topic. So if you can get into the habit of using those resources for your study, then hopefully your learning journey will be fruitful and very successful. Just as a reminder, this week make sure you've completed the orientation quiz. So I do put all the reminders up the top on the course website. In addition to that, I want you to also be familiarising yourself and not ignoring what these headings here say, because they will be changing from week to week. These are your weekly instructions in terms of what you need to do to pre-prepare for the lecture, tutorial, revision material, as well as what's going on assessment-wise each week. Okay, so for this week you need to do the sample quiz, as well as read topic 1 and online chapter A to prepare for your first quiz, which is due next week. And that quiz will appear here in this location, but in the week 3 materials. So I've tried to set things out as clearly as possible to guide you through your learning journey in the course. Make sense? Seems clear, reasonable, no confusion? Okay, if you've got any suggestions for improvement, or if you're not comfortable with anything, I welcome your feedback, because I'm trying to make this as student-friendly and learner-friendly as possible. And I've done quite a few iterations, so I'm always seeking to improve where I can. Okay, so today is the role of the systems analyst. So basically what we're looking at, as I said, we're looking at who is a systems analyst, what role do they have in terms of helping organisations solve business problems? Because organisations really strive to, I guess, be competitive in their marketplace, to exist in their marketplace, to be as efficient as they can with the resources that they have. And sometimes in order to achieve those objectives and those goals, organisations need to think about what information systems they are using and or not using and or could potentially use. So we need to think about all of that in terms of how organisations operate and how we work within organisations and how we work most effectively and most efficiently. As a result, there may be a need to have a new system or to upgrade existing systems, and this is where our systems analysts can help the organisation to solve any business problems that they have and help them determine what their requirements may be and gather those requirements from people within the organisation. So there are different types of systems that solve business problems. We need to think of them in various ways in order to ask the right questions to determine, is there a problem? What do we need to be doing to solve that problem? And how do we change our thought process and how do we change our organisational processes to help us resolve that problem or serve a need that has arisen in the marketplace in which we exist? Again, we'll talk about the skills and related careers. So hopefully by the end of having looked at this topic, you'll have an appreciation about the role of a systems analyst in business. look at different types of tools and technologies and systems that actually get used within organisations. Really focus on the skills that a systems analyst needs to have. It's not just about the interpersonal skills of an analyst. An analyst also needs to have people skills, technical skills, and business skills. We need to have some technical skills. If we don't have those technical skills, we need to have a team which we can draw from to help us add value to those skills that we are lacking in. So it's about being resourceful. You've also got to have some business skills, know how to liaise, know how businesses run, how they operate, how to solve business problems, how to identify business problems, and how to think about the right types of questions to ask to try and elicit information from people in organisations to even determine if they have problems, because they might not even understand what their problems are. Think about ethical behaviour with systems analysts and looking at various job titles in the field of employment. So just to reiterate, the pre-reading for today's lecture was online chapter A. So I'd like you to get into the habit, as I said, of reading the chapter and at least printing off the lecture slides or having them with you before coming to class. So you can make notes and have a bit of a background as to what I'm covering each week, because that's going to, again, consolidate what you've read and learnt and add value to what I'm giving you and providing you in the class. Also in some lectures, as I mentioned, I'll actually be doing activities to consolidate that learning, but obviously there's no relevant activities for today. We're not actually creating any diagrams, so I won't be doing that in today's class. So I guess it's important to think about information technology, think about how organisations use information technology and what we need to do to make ourselves as organisations work better and more strategically. So we need to think about systems analysis and design and what those processes actually mean. By being involved in systems analysis, you may be part of a team that is involved in the systems analysis process. You may actually be the systems analyst, in which case you'll be heavily involved in this process. What the process actually means is we need to think about understanding what the problems are in an organisation and specifying in detail what the requirements are for an organisation. What does the system want, what does the organisation want accomplished with the systems that they have and or could potentially have. So we need to think about in detail what is the end goal. Because if we don't have an end goal, we can't work towards an end goal. And everybody needs to be clear about what they're trying to accomplish in designing and developing a system. So analysis comes first, where we understand and specify in detail what the system needs to accomplish. We then follow that on with systems design, which is the part where we actually specify in detail how the system should be physically implemented. So looking at database design, looking at architecture design, coming up with some various models to then help the system programmers or coders actually implement the system and start developing the system. So there's the requirements phase, there's the design phase, which could entail and does entail actually starting with the development process. So a bit of a life cycle in terms of how we develop systems. The systems analyst obviously is the person or the business professional that is actually involved in gathering those requirements from the customers. Okay, and using different tools and techniques in order to document those requirements that A, the customer gives to them and mutually agrees on with the systems analyst, and B, the systems analyst can provide or pass on that information to those that are looking at designing the actual system. We can't design something unless we have a template to work from or a blueprint to work from. As I mentioned in today's tutorial with my class, think about it as building a house. You can't build a house unless you have the plans. You can't draw up the plans unless you've had a discussion with who the customer is, or unless you've been and spoken to a designer or an architect to draw up those plans. So it's a similar kind of process. You can't have something come into reality, a feasible product, unless you've engaged in that particular process of gathering the requirements, documenting the requirements, then fulfilling the needs of what's required. So in this course, we'll look at the role of the systems analyst, and today we'll look at that in a bit more detail, but it's more about understanding the tools and techniques that are available to systems analysts to develop information systems. Okay, so what tools do we need to use? What techniques are available out there to document the requirements for a given system? So I guess I think it's important to determine where do we start. Okay, there are certain problems that need to be solved in organisations, and here are some classic examples of the types of business problems that may need to be addressed. Okay, so I've got, I guess, in blue highlighting what the potential problem may be. Let's have a look at the first example. So customers might want to order products at any time of the day or night. As a customer, that seems fairly reasonable, right? We want to be able to do ordering day, night, 24/7, whatever. What's the actual business problem here? The problem is actually how to process those orders around the clock without adding to the selling cost. Customer has a demand. What's the problem that we need to solve as an organisation providing that service to the customer? We need to think about processing the orders around the clock to meet that any time of the day, but we also don't want to compromise the cost of the product. And I've got a few examples, and I'm just going to go through a couple of them. Suppliers want to minimise their inventory holding costs by shipping parts used in the manufacturing process in smaller daily batches. So that's the problem, or that's the need, I guess, or the desire from the supplier's point of view. What's the actual problem? The problem is how to order in smaller lots and accept daily shipments to take advantage of supplier discounts. So there's kind of a need and a desire that target groups can specify or have specified. It's then up to us, or the systems analyst, to try and determine what is the actual business problem that needs to be solved. And from a business perspective, how can we meet that need of that particular target audience via using tools and technologies and information systems. And there's a marketing example. Management continually wants to know the current financial picture of the company, including profit and loss, cash flow, and stock market forecasts. Okay, that's what management wants. What's the actual business problem that's going on here that needs to be addressed through the use of an information system? The problem actually is how to collect, analyse and present all the financial information management wants. Okay, so you can kind of see how it's been flipped. There's a need by someone. How, as an organisation, how as a systems analyst, can we turn that need into a business problem to resolve that issue and I guess meet that need of whoever the target person is? Okay, so some really good examples of how to think about problems versus wants, and how do we, I guess, convert those into how we be strategic in the use of information systems to address those problems. So as a systems analyst, I've got a bit of a timeline, well, not really a timeline, but a set of tasks that one would need to think about and consider when becoming a systems analyst. And you might not be able to see it at the back there, but you know, it's definitely in the slides if you've printed them out. What we need to think about is we need to research and understand the problem. I guess really verify the benefits of solving the problem outweigh the costs. There's no point in saying we've got all these problems, let's just do everything, if there's no business benefit to the organisation. Okay, it's no point in doing something just for the sake of doing it to say we're going to make A and B and C happy if it's going to end up financially ruining the organisation. So there's got to be some sort of business benefit. There's got to be some sort of benefit which outweighs the cost of embarking on the task of producing a new system or designing or upgrading a current system, for example. Once we've researched the problem and verified that it's actually a worthwhile task or project to embark on, you need to then define the requirements for solving the problem. What do we need to do to resolve this problem? Then develop a set of possible solutions, decide which solution is best and make a recommendation, define the details of the solution, implement it and monitor to make sure that you obtain the desired results. Yes?
How can you know how much it's going to cost to implement the system before you define the requirements for that system?
Well, you've got to, I guess, it's part of, we're not doing project management now, but I'll kind of talk about that in project management, and that's why I don't talk about it here. But in one of the, I think it was in last week's lecture when I had the phases of the life cycle, system development life cycle, before we hit all those systems analysis activities, there was the pre-planning activities, where you kind of have to have a business case, and that's basically, you've got to really go out and do your homework, see what's been done, see what systems are out there, come up with some potential options before you actually start the analysis work, because there's no point in...
So at that time, you already know some of the requirements. You've
got to have some sort of ballpark indication of this is what we want, this is what we think we're going to achieve. Scope it out in like a bit of a plan, and that's more like a business plan perspective. It's not actually going to the people that work in the organisation and say, okay, what do you want this new system to look like? What screens do you want? What databases do you want? It's more of a...
That looks fairly sequential, whereas you probably wouldn't, what you did wouldn't be quite...
It's not exactly in that... I mean, yes, it is kind of sequential, but there is, and I think I mentioned it last week, we kind of go on an iterative approach. So, but before you can even go anywhere, you've got to have a baseline at which to start with. So it's more of a developing a baseline and coming up with a business case. You know, is what we're doing really going to provide some benefit to the organisation? What are the likelihood of the costs? You know, it's going to cost $100,000, but the benefit is we're going to see over 10 years a profit of whatever. So you can make those ballpark, I guess, guesstimates at the beginning, because someone has to go to management and say, this is what it's going to look like, give us the money to then go ahead and start designing and speaking to people. So there's kind of a bit of pre-analysis that takes place in order to do this. Then once you've got the full approval, then you go and do everything that we're talking about in coming up with all the diagrams. Does that make sense? So it is a bit of an iterative thing and a bit of backwards and forwards. Now, the class list has just made its way back out the front. For those of you that have come in late, come up here after the lecture and mark your name off. So here are some examples, and I guess a little bit of terminology that I think you should all really be familiar with in terms of systems, subsystems, and information systems. Again, it's not really... You can all read, so I'm not going to read out definitions. Happy with that? I think you're all quite confident in reading, but I guess it's just important to understand components and some definitions, because they will help your understanding of what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about in class, and perhaps what we're working on in tutorials. So we need to think about a system as a whole. We need to think about information systems as well as subsystems. So in determining what system we need to really be aware of, are there subcomponents to that system? And it's all about managing how the system is being developed and understanding what those subcomponents are, and then working out how you're going to break down this development project into smaller projects in order to achieve the outcomes, which is the entire system and information system that's being delivered to the organisation. Some other definitions: functional decomposition, breaking a system down into smaller parts. We need to also think about the system boundary and the automation boundary. There's got to be a boundary between the system and the environment in which it operates. There's got to be a boundary between the system, which is automated, and the manual part of a system. So sometimes we use a system, there's got to be some manual component to operating that system. There can also be some automated components of that system. Here's some examples of a little bit of what I've talked about. Here we have all information systems. So one organisation does not have one information system. We generally have multiple information systems within one organisation. So we have a customer relationship management system which has these different components within that customer relationship management system. And again, these are all systems in themselves. There's an accounting and finance system, there's a manufacturing system, there's a human resources system. They all form, in this particular example, all of the information systems in this particular scenario. So when we talk about systems, there can be multiple systems, there can be subsystems which are part of systems, there can be just standalone information systems, which all make up an organisation's information systems. So just a visual representation of how it can all fit together. Lots of different components when talking about information systems, and it's really important to think about all those components. We need the people to engage, interact with the systems, to either provide information, use the systems, or receive information from those systems. We need the hardware. We need to provide some inputs, receive some outputs. Obviously, the software is going to facilitate the system. And we need to have some sort of procedures to understand how to use and manipulate these systems and how to get the best value for the systems that we've currently got. We also obviously need to have a repository of where we store the data and information from that particular system. So all of these components are really important. And if one of those components breaks down, then there are going to be issues in how effective an organisation can be in using these systems. And because some of these systems are maybe not as good as what they are, or part of these components, they could be the driving force for why we need to actually have a new system in an organisation. So one of these could be the problem. The outputs are not good enough. We can't determine how we're progressing as an organisation. We can't see our dashboards. We can't print reports. What is the need to develop and design a system that can provide appropriate outputs? So we can see visually here we've got the environment surrounding the system, which is here. The system boundary within its environment. We've got the manual part of the system, which are tasks completed by people. And we've got the automation boundary here, where the automated part of the system is carried out by the computer. So again, another visual representation of those definitions that are provided. Some examples of information systems. There's quite a lot of them. What sort of information system do you think would be used in your traditional, I guess, shopping centre, Coles / buying your food scenario?
Purchasing system.
Purchasing, yep. Otherwise, we can also call it a transaction processing system. Okay, so when you go shopping, you're purchasing your transactions, we have a transaction processing system. What's actually happening when we are using a transaction processing system? What part of it is manual? What part of it is automated?
The manual part would be the checkout person scanning all your items, and then the automated part would be something like sending the information that's scanned the barcodes to the database.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm just going to repeat what you said for the benefit of the recording and the externals. So the automated part of the manual part of the transaction processing system would be the actual person, and it might not be the checkout person because we've got self-serve as well now. It's either us or whoever's handling the actual product and scanning that product. So that's the manual interaction with that transaction processing system. I guess the automated part is it scans the barcode, but it's the data that is being gathered at the time of that scan taking place and what information is being stored in the database. What information do you think would be stored as part of that transaction? Because we do receive some outputs as well.
An ID for the product.
ID for the product.
Amount of stock.
Amount of stock. So we've got to keep an eye on the stock levels that are being affected by the fact that this product has been purchased. The price of the product, yes. So not only are we collecting information which is going into a database and being stored, but we are also receiving an output from that transaction processing system. What is the output from that transaction processing system? The immediate output that we benefit from? The receipt. Okay, so we get the receipt, which shows us, again, details of what we've purchased, the amount of the product, what the product was, and the quantity that we've purchased. Okay, so quite a lot happening in that scenario. How do you think management benefits from transaction processing systems?
They can monitor how much of what people buy and adjust their stock accordingly.
Yep, management can monitor the amount of what people buy and adjust the stock accordingly. What else can they determine through the information gathered in a transaction processing system?
Shopping habits.
About you.
Yeah, shopping habits. I often get these lovely emails from Woolworths saying, "Hi Kathy, these are the specials for the week," because somehow they've tracked what I'm purchasing. So it's about tracking what's being sold. It's all about now even more so marketing specifically to individual customers, and they do customise their marketing. I know that for a fact because they send you emails that are targeted based on your shopping habits, because they send you emails that say, if you spend so much money over the next 3 weeks, we'll give you a $30 rewards card or whatever. But I've spoken to a couple of people that have received the same emails, and the amount that they specify that you should spend each week is different depending on the person that you speak to. So for example, mine might say, Kathy, spend $160 a week for the next 3 weeks to get this benefit. The other email to another person could say spend $120 a week, because they actually monitor your buying habits in the past to determine what your average spend is, and they want you to keep spending that money. But I tend to not do that, just out of spite. Spite is a good word. I don't like to spend as much as what they want me to spend, even though sometimes I can't help it. So
perhaps their system is retrograde to that.
Yes.
But for you anyway.
Yeah, I don't like that mechanism, and sometimes I'm just out of spite and under protest is what I was trying to think of. Sometimes I just don't activate those offers that they want. So it is all strategic. And you can see there are lots of stakeholders involved in using that particular system, as well as all of these other systems. You've got to think about who the users are, who the customers are, how is it being used in different parts of an organisation, regardless of the type of system it is. And there are different ways systems can be used and add benefit to different people in different parts of the organisation. So having done all that and trying to think about what systems we need, as a systems analyst, you need to have a lot of skills. Technical knowledge, business knowledge, people knowledge, as well as the skills associated with those. You've got to be able to talk to people. You've got to understand businesses. You've got to understand the right questions to ask. You've got to know who to speak to. You've got to know who to find out who to speak to. Okay, so it's about strategy and knowing the ins and outs of how businesses operate, who to communicate with, asking the right questions, and gaining an understanding and consolidating what you've learnt and interpreted to ensure that what you have obtained is actually what was meant to be obtained. Because often is the scenario, customers don't know what they want, and they think they know what they want, but until they see it visualised, then they'll tell you, no, that's not what I meant this. So it's a lot of, as I said, iteration involved, and toing and froing and going backwards and forwards to actually make sure you get the requirements and that they are true and correct. We need to use a lot of tools and techniques as systems analysts. There are quite a number of tools that are available, applications that assist developers in creating models of other components, and you would have all received, confirm or not confirm, an email, something to do with Microsoft Dream Spark. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. I strongly encourage you to use that or go to that link because as IT students you do have free access to that software, and download yourselves or grab yourselves a copy of Microsoft Visio. That's really useful, and that's a great tool, and one of the tools that we can use, or you can use as a systems analyst, in creating a lot of the diagrams / models that we're looking at in this course. So access that email and source yourselves a copy of Microsoft Visio, because you won't have to pay for it. There are other tools out there, and part of your process of doing research, and perhaps for the first assignment, you'll be looking at what tools are out there to establish what you might want to use in perhaps doing your assignments or in your future careers, or even what's out there as a systems analyst to help come up with these particular models. Again, there are different techniques that can be used, project planning techniques, cost-benefit analysis, interviewing techniques. If you don't have interviewing techniques, you can't talk to people to find out what the requirements are for you to model those requirements in order to give them on to the designers. There are different ways we can gather requirements. Interviewing is one of those ways that we can gather requirements, and we'll be talking about that as well. There are different techniques for modelling the requirements, which again we'll be looking at throughout the course, as well as a few other techniques, which I guess are part of also the system design phase. So these are technical knowledge and skills that an analyst needs to have in order to, I guess, successfully fulfill their role. Some examples. You've got to know about computers and how they work. You've got to understand databases and how we have storage and hardware, because these could be some of the problems that an organisation is facing. So how do we address those problems? Networks and protocols, programming languages, you know, how to use communication and collaborative technology. How can they benefit organisations? And if you don't have that technical knowledge and those skills, then you need to be able to know how to ask the right questions and who you can use as a resource to help you determine answers to potential problems that organisations can have. Because we can't be experts in everything. We all don't know everything about everything. It's a matter of being smart and knowing who to ask in order to help you answer any questions that you may have. So it's about being resourceful. Business knowledge and skills. Okay, you're working with organisations, you're helping organisations be strategic, you're helping them A, identify problems that they have, and B, identify what the problem is and what the information systems problem is and how you can use tools and technology and create systems to help them solve their business problems. In order to do that, you kind of have to have a bit of a background about, you know, what business functions do organisations perform, for example. How are the organisations structured and managed? So not every organisation is the same, as we know. Some of you may already have jobs or you've had multiple jobs, and you'll know that every organisation has its own management structure. Every organisation has its own culture. And by culture, I don't mean cultural diversity and cultural background. I mean how people act and how they behave, and is it a happy place, is it a sad place, is it a social place, etc., etc. Or the way people behave and the way that people do their work. Are they casual? Are they formal? You know, do they have weekly, fortnightly, morning tea, or whatever? That's all to do with the culture of the organisation. So you need to understand quite a lot of these things in order to be a strategic systems analyst. So sometimes you need to do the background work about the organisation and find out about it before you can help them solve their problems. Or speak to the right people and a number of different people to then come up with your viewpoint in terms of answering these questions. Why should you not only speak to one person in an organisation to find out the answers to these questions?
Biased.
Well, there could be bias. You could be speaking to the CEO that says it's a fantastic organisation, everyone's great, everyone's happy. Then you can go speak to one of the middle-level managers that says, I hate being here, I'm just here because I have to be and it's paying my mortgage. You could speak to an employee that works under a different manager that says, this is a fantastic organisation, my manager's great, you know, I've got a flexible working environment, he doesn't mind if I'm a little bit late or if I have to take the kids to a doctor's appointment, you know, I can work late, blah, 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 blah. So it depends on who you talk to as to what responses you may get to what's going on. But ultimately, you know, you need to speak to different people to form an opinion if an opinion hasn't already been formed. And that's where the interpersonal skills really come into play as a systems analyst. You've got to have people skills. And organisations will take a step back from you and your credibility if you don't demonstrate those people skills. And they kind of will lose a bit of faith in your ability if you don't demonstrate those people skills. Because you need to think about who you're talking to. Okay? You need to talk to managers, users, programmers, technical specialists, customers and vendors. Wow, that's a long list. You've got to engage with many stakeholders in order to fulfill your role as a systems analyst. And take a system from initial idea to final implementation. That's the key role of the systems analyst. So they've got to develop a rapport. You know, you've got to negotiate with management for money, resources, budget, time, etc., etc. There are lots of conflicting things happening here. Management's going to want the best possible solution in the quickest possible time for the cheapest amount of money. Why not? They're entitled to. But the reality is it doesn't happen that way. You get what you pay for. That's how it goes. So you've got to have a rapport. You've got to be frank with management. You've got to tell them this is what you're getting and give them some tangible costs and some tangible benefits, because that's what they want to know. How much is it going to cost me, and what am I going to get as a result of embarking on this particular task? So you've got to have some, specific skills, capabilities and attitudes to deal with lots of different people in your domain. You've got to be all of those things as a systems analyst. And typically have multiple roles in a given day, depending on what your task is and what you're trying to achieve on a particular day. So just to finish off, we'll have a look at some analysis-related careers, in case some of you are thinking about having different types of careers. There are lots of different types of careers, and you'll generally find out there that organisations have multiple roles, and the role might not necessarily be called or advertised as a systems analyst per se. Okay, so this is just to give you a bit of a broad understanding of the types of roles that can entail or involve some aspect of systems analysis, regardless of what your job title may be. There are careers in research, there are careers in defence, there are careers in private industry, there are, in the public sector. So there are different types of careers available in lots of different areas, obviously all around the world. So here are some job titles that you may come across or may be familiar with in terms of, what you see yourself doing once you've graduated. Or you might be thinking about different employment opportunities now. You might be thinking of getting some work experience. These are some of the titles that you may come across and may see in your searches in terms of what's available and what's out there. Programmer analyst, business systems analyst, end user, consultant. So consultant is a word that's quite heavily used. Consultant means you have to liaise with people. You may have to gather requirements, find out what problems are, and solve those problems. As well as being a designer, architect, web developer, etc., etc. You might be a web developer, but you still need to liaise with a systems analyst to be able to develop the system, and so forth and so forth. So I just want to finish off, I think that's where I want to finish off, yeah, just with this very quick, short clip.
Here's your scientifically
It's really quick,
career.
so
Systems analyst.
I'll just start it again.
Systems analyst.
Hold on.
Systems analyst. Systems analyst.
All right, it's really quick, so you just got to listen.
Here's your scientifically selected career.
Systems analyst. Systems analyst. Systems analyst.
Systems analyst.
All right.
There you go, that was it. Nothing too fancy. All right, so does anyone have any questions, comments or concerns? Okay, see you all next week.